This time on CarCraft Video, we are back working on the 86 Buick Regal, the Demon Elmo. Since we left it last in Minnesota, the car's come here to Cool Hand Customs in Middleton, Wisconsin. And it's a small shop. It's owned by EJ and Amy Fitzgerald. They do some really good work here. They turned out some SEMA cars in the past several years. So the car's in good hands. Since they've been working on it, they gutted the interior and installed a roll cage and welded it to the frame. They've also pulled out the 307 Olds and the 204R transmission. And in its place, we were just working on this yesterday, dropped in a mock-up block 6.1 liter junk Hemi engine that they've had sitting in their backyard to get it into place to sort of see where we need to put the engine, make the motor mounts, and then the trans mount. So this week we're gonna work on that, plus some wiring and plumbing and some of the ancillary systems. We've got some gauges to put in and some interior bits. If we meet our goal and the car is ready and running by drag week, my colleague KJ Jones is going to drive the car all week on drag week. We're going to make some exhibition passes, and that'll be exciting. I hope we can make that happen.
All right, so this is the heat exchanger. We should be able to get quite a bit of air movement under this bumper. This is pretty wide open.
They're not very tall.
Well, if I grind the edges of these bumper mounts off, I think I could get it up another inch, maybe even further.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, let's try that.
All right. Okay.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I could take the corner off these buckets.
I'm okay with that.
Let's melt some plastic. I am going to replicate basically a gas tank strap so that we can strap that heat exchanger right to the front. I think that's going to be the easiest way to get it on there. You put a little lube on it, but I think this bit's done already anyway.
This is the 5 mile an hour inner. All it's doing is adding a ton of weight. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take our plasma cutter and we're gonna cut this off because we need to keep this section. This is actually where our bumper mounts, and it will do us no good if we have no way to mount our bumper, but we can get rid of all of this junk in the inside, which is a considerable amount of weight.
Yeah, about 5 pounds. I'm telling you, that's what's gonna get us under 10.
What we're doing here is we're gonna wire the back of the gauge pods. These are some Stewart Warner gauges that we have here. They're a very simple design on the back as far as wiring goes. We're gonna terminate with ring terminals on the back of the gauge, and then we're going to daisy chain these together and pin them out into a plug. This is a Deutsch plug. I prefer these. You can use weather pack. You can butt connector these into the car. I don't suggest it though. It's really nice to be able to pull the panel out, pull this out in case you want to route AC or any other wiring in the car. Right now I'm doing the power wire, the ignition that runs to the back of all of these gauges. Number one rule when you're wiring is don't make this stuff too tight. If you ever have a problem and this pulls out, you're going to want to be able to trim it back, strip it again, and put another ring terminal on it.
Feel that? Right in the molars.
This radiator came from, what I understand, a SN95 Mustang. It's kind of cool that it worked out. It's thick enough, the core's thick enough to support 1,000 horsepower too, which will be more than enough to cool our supercharged Hemi. But what's interesting is it comes with these posts, top and bottom, and however it fits in the Mustang, it makes sense, but it looks a little odd here. There's posts on the bottom too, and they actually fit the holes in our core support that the factory radiator went in, so that's kind of a bonus. EJ is just figuring an upper mount and trying not to get too complicated.
The aluminum, obviously being a lighter metal, expands way more than the steel does. So we can't just solid mount this anywhere,
right,
or it will crack.
Here's our Odyssey battery going into the tray that EJ made a little bit ago. It's gonna be perfect for starting our 1,000 horsepower Hemi.
What we're gonna do now is we're gonna start making our battery cables. We're gonna start with the negative. Always run the negative from the battery post to the engine block. The largest amp draw you have in the car is when you hit the starter. I'm gonna clean this up because there's a little bit of corrosion on the end of this. Probably been sitting around the auto parts store for a minute.
Your trans tunnel looks great. I like the, you said it was removable in case we need to service the
Oh yeah, we can get to any of the wiring once this panel comes off, which will be nice. And we should be able to wire this up. It's tall enough we can probably get a nice loop.
Yeah. And then what were we talking about before? Sort of getting a seat in here and kind of seeing where its seating position is, and then we can decide on a final position of this, whether it's low on the trans tunnel or maybe up or forward or rear.
More of an, whatever feels more comfortable.
Yeah.
We're sitting here. I have a feeling we're probably going to end up extending this
Okay.
because of the seat position, but
Yeah.
and the fact that we want this to be usable for multiple people.
True. To go behind our Gen 3 Hemi, we're using a TCI 4L80E transmission. This is a Chevy transmission, and most aftermarket ECMs tend to work better with GM transmissions. It's just more popular of a swap. So that's why we're going with this rather than the transmission that came behind an Hellcat or a Gen 3 Hemi engine. This is an exciting moment here. Our Stewart Warner Muscle Series gauges are going back in the car. EJ and Amy made this cool panel to mount our gauges so we can keep the stock look of the dashboard. After our camera crew left, EJ and Amy still had a ton of work to do. The mock-up block needed to be removed, and they needed to make the permanent motor mounts. After that, they joined the TCI 4L80E transmission to the newly supercharged 6.4-liter Hemi engine. Once the engine and transmission were in place, EJ and Amy had to finish building the transmission crossmember, then build an entirely new exhaust system. Once the engine was topped off with new fluids from Peak, it was loaded onto the trailer to head to Holly's Mo Party for a test session, then ending up at its ultimate destination, Hot Rod Drag Week 2022. Here we are at Hot Rod Drag Week 2022, and this is day 2, and we're at Lucas Oil Raceway in Indianapolis. And as you can see, we're still working on the car. I don't think that's a failure on our part. This was a very short time frame build, and everybody here is dealing with parts shortages, parts delays, and that was the same thing with us. And on top of that, we had some tuning issues and some electrical gremlins. But I think we're working through it all right now. We got Cody working on the car, we got Rob from QA1 working on the car, KJ's helping out, and we're all lending a hand. So I think the goal for today is to get the car running and make an exhibition pass. I think if we can go down the track today, that's a huge win for all of us. The broken pushrod kept us sidelined for a couple days while we located replacements, and it took some probing with our voltmeter to finally get the transmission shifting properly and all our brake lights and turn signals working.
Right now we're trying to get our first checkout, just get the car down the road basically before we get it on the drag strip. Had some challenges and seems like everything's been worked out. It wasn't doing that before, so we got into second gear right away with the transmission in drive. That's a good sign. I think that's a belt. Or an idler. We'll have to check those. I think it's an idler maybe. Okay. Little bit of a flat spot on tip-in. Tip-in is, you know, as you go into the accelerator, I just kind of try to punch it hard just now a little bit and just a small dead area. With additional calibration and tuning, we can probably get that out of here. You see that sort of went away, the squealing? Idler pulley, it got hot. Now this hot noise goes away. Temperature staying still at 220, so that could just be what it wants to be at. With the horsepower this car has on paper, it should be in the low 10-second zone with relative ease. Conservatively, 1040s, and aggressively 10.0s. You know, I'll bet the farm it doesn't happen with just starting it up, getting it on the track, and mashing the gas. Hopefully it'll run well, but it won't just crush a number, especially a target number like that on its first try. And quite honestly, as a driver, I shouldn't be aiming to do that. You know, first time on the drag strip, you trust that everything is right, but you just need to shake it out first. So we'll probably have a gradual approach to eventually running the target number. And if it can do it, I mean, everybody is a true hero. And if it doesn't do it, at least we know that we tried giving it absolutely our best shot. Take another go with this. The first lap was okay. As I said, we're just gonna kind of take it easy a little bit and get the feel for the car and see if all the systems are working. And the burnout was good, but the car kind of pitched sideways, so I don't think it got enough of a burnout. And then in launching, there's a two-step on the car to moderate the engine RPM when I'm staging. And it was set at 3,000 RPM. Looking back, I think that was a little too aggressive. The car pushed through the beams, basically. My foot was on the brake, and this is a foot brake car, not a trans brake car. My foot was pretty firm on the brake, and then when I gave it throttle, it just ran itself right through the brake. So we lowered the launch RPM to 1,500, cut that 3,000 in half, and I think that might be a better starting point that we can work up to. So maybe the sweet spot is 2,000, maybe it's 2,500, maybe it's just going to be happy at 1,500. We're going to try to figure that out. During the run, the car drifted, it sort of powered itself to the left. And in a drag car, anytime the car is kind of driving you, I mean, you can correct, but sometimes you get into a space where you overcorrect and you get in a lot of trouble. This is the first time, it was the first lap on the car. I elected to just lift at the 660, or just about 660 feet, and just mosey it down the rest of the way. So as far as 8th mile data, we're working off an 8-second lap, which isn't very good at all. Well, for some cars it is. For this car, it's not very good. And a 15-second ET, which I'm certain is much, much better, but just gonna take baby steps, made some adjustments. I think the next adjustment will also be to increase the tire pressure from 16 pounds to 18 pounds. This is a drag radial tire, so it might like 18 pounds a little better.
On CarCraft video, you can see
Well, that second run, in a word, it was amazing. I did a good burnout, and the burnout was much better than the first one. Everything was better than the first lap. The car launched, the left tire came up off the ground a little bit, a 1.5 and change 60 foot, which is really pretty good. My plan was to increments, not just lay all into it in the first 660 feet. So gradually rolled into the pedal, and as I felt it pick up speed, momentum, and it felt good, kept rolling into it. So by about 700 feet, just past the 660, about 700 feet, it was ready to go all in. And when we went through, it was still pulling very, 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 very hard. So this combination of theoretic Hellcat engine, but a 6.4 liter Mopar Hemi engine with top half from Metalbrock, it's the business. It really is a good setup. Everything through and through worked well. We went through at 11.60 with an O, which is really very good, and the mile an hour is about 117, almost 118 mile an hour. So across the board, I am super pleased with that run that we just made, and I'm anxious to see how much further we can progress at the next drag strip. I think by the end of this thing, it's going to be a very, very impressive car.
My friend and colleague, KJ Jones, in the driver's seat, we made a total of 8 passes during drag week and drove the car on the street the last 3 days. QA1's Rob McPherson flew in to help, and his expertise was invaluable throughout the week, getting the suspension fine-tuned for the drag strip.
And KJ Jones gets a good launch out of the GCAT. Dink is spinning the tires down there. KJ is going to try to run this thing down in the 10-second bracket. He's going to do it.
Our best pass was a 10:32 at 136 miles an hour, and KJ said there was plenty more in it. I think this could be a 9-second car with some dedicated slicks on 15-inch wheels. Overall, I consider this project a success. We built this car in a very short amount of time, and the fact that it was running by drag week was a big accomplishment in my book. That we went 10s is even more impressive. Project GCAT, as it's affectionately known as now, is a solid performer. The supercharged horsepower helps, but it's mainly due to QA1's support. GCAT launched hard at the track and drove straight. And because the suspension is so versatile, the car is comfortable to drive on the street. I bet we could even autocross the thing. What's next for GCAT? Well, I know a trip to Power Tour 2023 is being discussed, and maybe it'll show up at Drag Week again next year too. Either way, stay tuned for more info and updates at hotrod.com.